All right, so today we are starting a new series called Next is Now. We're going to be looking in the book of Joshua, and I'm going to introduce this whole idea of this series by talking about the word obedience. And some of you guys might be rolling your eyes out there like, oh, we're talking about what? Obedience? Like, what is this? But I think this is a crucial idea within the Christian life because if we're going to be honest, for some of you, you guys have been Christians for a long, long time, but you still are thinking in the back of your mind that there's something more, like that you're missing out on something. And I think that actually might be true. And I think the key to all this is the word obedience. And I think obedience might open this door to aspects of the Christian life that you might be missing out on. So we're going to read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 to 6, and then we'll hop right into it. It says this: After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all the people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, towards the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give to them. Man, have you guys ever come to the end of something and just been completely overcome by emotion? Like maybe it's like the end of the sports season for you and you're in the locker room with all the boys and you're just like kind of sad and like emotional, or maybe you've come to the end of a relationship and like you are like actually overcome by this emotion of sadness, or maybe you've come to the end of an assignment at school and you were like overcome by joy because it's like, I'm finally done this thing. And for some of you guys, like you are about to come to the end of your high school time, like you're about to graduate and you are being overcome by all sorts of emotions, maybe confusion or happiness, excitement, or like anxiety, like I don't know, you're just overcome by emotion. For me, I need to confess that there was a time when I was sitting in a movie theater and I was just overcome by emotion. I was crying like a baby, and the movie was Avengers Endgame. And for me, I felt like this was like the end of a long journey that I'd been on with all of these Marvel characters. Like I started watching these movies when I was in high school. I really love comic books, so I like made it through all these movies. I'd rewatch them all, and when Avengers Endgame came out, I was just crying through the whole thing. But my girlfriend didn't really have the same experience. When she first watched Avengers Endgame, it just like was a movie to her. And the reason that is because she had not seen every single Marvel movie that came before it. She actually hadn't watched any of the Captain America movies, which is like pretty crucial to the whole storyline of like Steve Rogers and the Shield and all this stuff that's going on, but whatever. So I did what any good boyfriend would do in this situation, and I took her through all of the Marvel movies that she needed to watch, and then we rewatched Avengers Endgame. And when we rewatched it, she had a completely different experience. She was crying like a baby from the beginning to the end. She's just sitting there like Iron Man. She's like crying like a baby because she now understood the backstory. So she had an emotional connection to all of those characters. And here's the point. Sometimes in order to understand the gravity of a situation, you need to first go back and understand how you got to that moment. Like in order to truly understand the present moment that you're in, you need to understand the past that you've already gone through, right? And that's exactly what's going on with Joshua. That's kind of what's going on here. I read these verses to you, and I'm sure for some of you, I was reading them out and they were going in one ear and out the other. Already, you've kind of forgotten what I read, and that's totally okay, because Joshua is like, this is Joshua chapter 1, so you're thinking this is like the beginning of something, but it's actually the continuation of this story that's been going on for a while, and it starts way back. And in order to like actually appreciate what's going on here, we need to understand the backstory. So it kind of starts off in Genesis chapter 12 with this guy named Abram. And Abram's name is quickly changed to Abraham, and he's kind of like the original Jew. He's like the father of all Jews, and he has a son named Isaac. Isaac has a son named Jacob, and Jacob is this like, he's this interesting dude, all right? And he actually wrestles with God, and then God changes his name to wrestles with God, which is the word Israel. And Israel, he has 12 sons who eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. But these 12 sons, they don't always get along, right? And they kind of have like this sibling thing going on, and they actually sell one of their younger brothers, his name is Joseph, into slavery. So Joseph gets sold into slavery. He ends up in this place called Egypt, and it's not a good time at first. If we're going to be honest, he's not having a good time, but eventually he works his way up the system, and he becomes second in command of all of Egypt. There's the Pharaoh, who's like the king, and then there is Joseph. And Joseph knows that there's a famine or like a big food shortage that's about to happen. So he begins to store up food in Egypt. Like for years and years and years. They're storing food in Egypt. Then this famine hits, and people from all the nations all around Egypt, all the cities, they're coming into Egypt to get this food. And so Israel and the rest of his sons, they eventually come to Egypt to get some food. And there they see Joseph, the lost brother, and they end up getting reconciled. And it's all like family coming back together or whatever, and it's good. They live there with their wives, and they start having babies, okay? They have like babies and babies and babies and babies, and they have like tons of kids. And then eventually Joseph, he dies of like old age, and the Pharaoh also dies, and a new Pharaoh comes along who did not know Joseph. He doesn't know him, or he doesn't remember, or he just doesn't care. And what he sees is that Egypt, his place, is just filled with all these Israelites because they had so many babies. And he's like, this is like an issue. We're Egyptians. What are we going to do with these people? So he puts them all into slavery. He makes them do all this work, and he keeps them in chains and all this stuff. And then the Israelites, they begin to just cry out to God. Okay, they're slaves. It's the worst. So they're crying out to God, and God hears them, and he remembers the promises that he has made to them. You see, way back in Genesis chapter 12, God made a promise to this guy Abraham that he would have many children, and he promised them a land. So now that time has come, and so God calls up a leader from the people, this guy that was an Israelite living in Egypt named Moses. So Moses, he comes up, and he is like the leader of this people. He's doing all these miracles with God's help. He like crosses the Red Sea with all the Israelites, and he leads them out of Egypt into the wilderness, all right? And then everything just kind of goes whack from there. The Israelites rebel against God. They mess up over and over and over again. They forget who God is. They forget who they are. And they end up wandering around the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years on their way to this promised land. They're just wandering and wandering around. Eventually, the entire first generation dies away, including Moses. He doesn't get into the promised land. But that's kind of where we leave off. The next generation is here, and they're on the edge of the promised land, and Moses has just died. Their leader has just died, and that brings us to Joshua chapter 1. He is the assistant to Moses. And now it's time for a big change. It's time for Joshua to kind of step it up. Joshua needs to take the place of Moses. He needs to take the place of leadership, and he needs to lead the Israelites, this rebellious group of people, into the promised land in the face of opposition. There's people in there that are enemies. It's going to be crazy, all right? And this is scary. This is like a scary, intimidating task. Joshua has been the assistant to Moses. He's gotten to watch this guy lead this group of people for many, many, many years. And now it's his time. This is intimidating. This is crazy for many different reasons. One, because these people, the Israelites, have been wandering for 40 years. There is a lot of built-up anticipation to get into the promised land, okay? Two, there are enemies, the Canaanites, inside of this land just waiting to like mess them up, okay? These guys mean business, and it's going to be scary. And three, Joshua has some really big shoes to fill, right? He has some big shoes to fill. He's following up after Moses. Can you imagine that? That is a daunting task. He's following up after Moses. And I mean, like, you never want to be the guy following up after like this great leader or a great hero, somebody that set the bar way too high. Like, you don't want to be the guy to come up after them, right? You want to like kind of follow up after a leader who did a very average job or maybe even a bad job, so that the bar is set low and you can come in and like exceed expectations and do a good job. I mean, for me, I'm trying to learn how to golf right now, and between me and you, it's not going very well. I'm probably the worst golf player on the planet. It's bad. It's a joke. But when I go golfing, I never want to go right after someone who hits a really good drive. Like, that is like the worst thing for me. I don't want somebody to hit a good drive and then it's my turn, because then the expectation is too high. They hit it so far and I know I can't do it and it's embarrassing or whatever. So I love to go after people that hit a really bad drive. Like, they just like shank it into the woods or like hit it right into the ground or whatever. Then I go up there and the bar is set really low. There's no expectation for me to be good. I can just go out there and play my game. And Joshua here is following up after Moses. The bar is set high. Moses is like a spiritual leader. He's a hero in the Bible. He's done a lot of amazing things. So this is insanely intimidating. It's probably scary. This is a daunting task. But Joshua has been given this task. The task to be obedient to God and to lead these people into the promised land, to be strong and courageous. But how? How is he going to be doing this task? How will he be obedient? He's given two reminders from God. One is a promise, and one is his presence. Promise, verse 2 and 3 says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. You see, God has made a promise to Abraham, and a promise to Isaac and Jacob and to Moses, and now this promise falls onto Joshua. This land, This land is yours. It is a promise, and Joshua can trust in it. When I was in college, we had this thing called gratis. For all the people that lived on campus, on dorms, there's a thing called gratis. Essentially, it was like chores, but when you did these chores, your tuition dropped. So school just got way insanely cheaper, and it was awesome. It's kind of a sketchy system, I'm not gonna lie, but you do dishes or work in the library or just like rake leaves or whatever, and you get like cheaper tuition. It's pretty cool. So if you cannot make your gratis shift, like if you missed your turn washing dishes, you could pay somebody else $20 and they would come in and wash your dishes for you. So it's near the end of the semester, it's almost Christmas break, and this girl comes up to me and asks me if I can take her shift. And I'm like, heck yeah, I want $20. Like it takes like 30 minutes to wash the dishes, it's gonna be awesome. So I go in there, I'm like scrubbing, and it's like the easiest $20 of my life, right? Next day I go up to her and I'm like, hey, you owe me $20, like let's get this done. And she's like, whoa. I'm actually gonna miss my next 2 shifts next week as well. So if you take those 2 shifts as well as the one you just did, I won't just give you $60, I'll give you $70 to cover them all, like an extra $10. So I'm like, hoo-wee. This is like the biggest payday of the year for me. I'm definitely in. So I take her shift, I take her next shift. Long story short, I never got paid. She totally pulled a fast one on me. She actually ended up leaving school a few days early, and I didn't know about this. And during Christmas break, she dropped out of college, so I never ended up getting my money. You see, this girl, this was someone who proved to be untrustworthy. But Joshua did not receive his promise from some girl. He's not doing some dishes. He's receiving this promise from God. And God has proven himself to be faithful over and over and over again. He is completely trustworthy. He's completely good. He's steadfast. He's strong. He's loving. And he will do what he says he's going to do. So Joshua can be strong and courageous. Joshua can be obedient to the task because God is the one promising him that this land is yours. This land is yours. I'm going to be with you in this. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. Be strong and courageous. The second reminder is God's presence. We see it in verse 5. He says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. See, God promised to be with Joshua the same way that he was with Moses. And he had a close relationship with Moses. He's doing all sorts of things. They are talking to each other like all the time. It's this crazy close relationship. And Joshua has a huge task in front of him. But in the midst of it, he can be strong and courageous because he knows that God is the one that's going to be there with him. God is reminding him that I'm the God of all gods. I'm the King of all kings. I'm all powerful. I'm the creator, and I'm going to be with you through all of it. You have nothing to fear. You have nothing to be worried about because I'm going to be there with you the whole way. I've got your back. Joshua, don't worry. I've got your back. I'm God. I can do this. Don't worry. Man. Without God's presence, Joshua definitely had a lot to fear, a lot to be worried about, because this is like the worst. He has big shoes to fill, so that's pretty scary. The group of people he's leading have been rebellious and done dumb things over and over again, so he's got to lead them into this land. And then inside that land, there's the Canaanites. They're enemies. They're waiting to just like mess him up, so there's a lot to be worried about. But now that he has God's presence with him, he knows that the God, the creator of all things, is going to be there with him, this all-powerful God. He has nothing to be afraid of. Nothing at all. He can be strong and courageous, and he can be obedient to the task he's been called to. And as I was reading this, I couldn't help but notice that we actually have a very similar call ourselves. And we have a very similar promise of God's presence as well. Matthew chapter 28, listen to this. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth have been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age. You see, just like how Moses was gone, Jesus is about to leave his disciples. And just how Joshua is told to arise and to go, the disciples are told to go and make disciples. And guys, the reason I bring this passage up is because I think there is a temptation that we all face. A temptation to remain within our comfort zone. I think it's there for all of us. For a lot of you, you are very comfortable coming to youth on Tuesdays. For a lot of you, you are very comfortable going to church. You are very comfortable doing your small group discussion, but that's kind of where you let it stop. But God's command, Jesus' command here is not just to go to youth. He doesn't really say that. His command is to go and make disciples. There's a big difference there. So the question is, for all of us, me included, is are we being obedient to that? Are we being obedient to that? You see, here's the thing. The Bible says that we have an enemy. And I've been thinking a lot about this, that this enemy doesn't mind that you guys are going to youth. Okay? He doesn't mind that you're going to youth. He doesn't mind that you guys go to church. He doesn't mind that you go to worship nights. He doesn't mind that you have a small group discussion. He doesn't even really mind that you get super convicted and that maybe you cry and you open up about things in small group, as long as you don't do anything about it. See, Jesus does not just want you to come to church and to come to youth and just to consume things for yourself over and over and over again. He wants you to actually do something about it, to do something tangible, to put this into action. Because sometimes I think we just get so used to coming to these things, to hearing messages, to hearing worship, to having a discussion. We show up week after week after week, ready to hear something, but not ready to put it into practice. Ready to hear something, but not to put into action. Ready to hear something, but not to do anything about it. And this is not the way it's supposed to be at all. Remember what it says here. Jesus has risen from the dead. Risen from the dead. And he says that all authority in heaven and on earth have been given to him. And then he tells you to go out and make disciples. So the question is, are you doing that thing? Think about all the people that have authority over you in your life. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's a teacher, your sports coach, or maybe for some of you, you guys have a job and it's your boss. These people have authority over you. Now, if one of those people told you to go and do something and you didn't do that thing, that would not be okay, right? That would not be appropriate. You didn't obey them. That's not a thing. Some of you guys have never actually done that before, right? You are very obedient, which is a good thing, but you always want to listen. Like if your coach tells you to do something, you do it. If your parents tell you to do something, you're going to do it, which is good. Keep doing that. That's a big deal. But at the same time, here's Jesus. And if you're a Christian, this is the person you're claiming to follow. This is the person that you say is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And he is giving you a task. He's asking you to be obedient. He's telling you to go out and to make disciples. And some of you guys have been Christians for a really, really long time and you haven't even tried. That is a big deal. My goal is not that you would walk away sad. I was the exact same way in high school. I was not very good at this, but my goal is that this week you would change. That this week you would put it into practice. That this week you would take a tangible step towards action. That you would take a step of obedience. And God said that he would be with Joshua wherever he goes. And Jesus says the exact same thing to us, that he would be with us to the end of the age. Like Joshua, we're going to face opposition, and it's going to be hard. It's not always going to be easy, but we can have confidence. We can take courage, and we can go forward. We can go be obedient because Jesus is with us through it all. And if you guys are anything like me in high school, this all sounds great in theory, right? This all sounds great, but this doesn't feel like your reality. Some of you sit here and you just don't feel God. You don't feel him. You don't sense his presence. You don't feel like God is with you. And so I ask you this, not to guilt trip you, not to make you feel bad, but are you making disciples? Are you trying to make disciples? Are you walking in obedience? Because that is where he says he will be with you and where you will experience his presence. When you are out there making disciples, when you are out there being obedient, that is where God says, I will not leave you, I will not forsake you, I will be with you there. You are not alone when you're doing that. You are not alone when you're obedient. You're not alone when you're making disciples. So that's the task. That's the task that I want to leave you with. I think that's the task that Jesus leaves us with right here. Will you be obedient? Will you be strong and courageous? Go, make disciples. And remember that in the midst of all that, God himself, the creator of all things, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, he is with you in that moment. You are not alone. He's with you every step of the way. So that is the task that we have for you guys this week. I hope you guys have a great discussion, and we will see you next time.